Welcome to Spirit Club, a podcast and community where we talk about what's really running the show, your inner world. I'm Angel, your host, your guide, and your spiritual bestie. Around here, we're all about doing the inner work because your outer reality is only ever a reflection of what's going on within. We practice radical ownership, freedom in faith, surrendering our path to God, and trusting our intuition like our lives depend on it. Because honestly, they do. So take a breath, open your heart, and let's dive in. Welcome, Spirit Club. Today we have on the show frequency artist, quantum guide, and Reiki Master, Britt Michaelian. Michaelian.
Yeah, you got
We
it. You got
practiced, and I still didn't get it. Anywho,
you did.
Britt's work intertwines creativity and transformation as she infuses Reiki frequencies into her paintings to facilitate healing. She also has a signature program to empower women through quantum manifestation, which I'm sure we will hear all about. So without further ado, welcome, Britt.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here. Yeah.
Michaelian. I even had a little way of saying it. Anyway.
It's a mouthful, I know. Yeah.
So Britt, can you start by sharing with us your sun, moon, and rising?
Yes. So my sun is Scorpio, my moon is Capricorn, and my rising is Virgo.
And which of these do you resonate with the most, if any?
I think I kind of bounce in between them. You know, like it just kind of depends what's going on. I tend to be, like the water sign, I flow with things, but again, as we were talking a little bit before, I'm also, earthy. I really seek grounding and, so I think I kind of go between all of them. And here's Bella.
Hello, Bella. Bella, what's your sun, moon, and rising? No.
I know.
If you guys are watching a video, there's a beautiful cat. Go check her out. And without knowing you more, I'm thinking okay, Scorpio sun, and the work you do is both creative and about transformation. Hello, very Scorpionic.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I was born on the Day of the Dead on November 2nd. So I definitely have always, and it's funny because I was younger, I didn't really understand, obviously when you're a kid, you don't understand any of this. And then as I've gotten older, it's made so much sense because when I was a kid, I kind of, I could see spirit world and sense. And, we lived in a home that had a lot of energy going on and I was the only one that could sense it. So that was kind of interesting because everybody else in my family was not aware of anything. So anyway, yeah, I'm very Scorpio.
Very Scorpio.
I'm very in touch with that side of, spirit and, physical.
Yeah. And I can't wait to hear more because your work is so unique. But one more question before I get into that. And that is, here on the show, we're all about doing the inner work to create the lives that we dream of. And so to get personal right off the bat, I would love to hear for you what inner work is alive and present right now. What are you?
Thank you. This is a good question because I'm working on a lot. I have 3 daughters and my youngest daughter is having some mental health struggles right now. And so my husband and I are very much kind of doing the inner child work, and it's funny because you work on your childhood wounds and you think you're done. Oh, I did that. I've worked on this and it just, things unfold and come up. And it's always, interesting because when I was younger, I would look at it as something was wrong with me or I had done something wrong. And now kind of I don't even think it's my consciousness because I feel like the consciousness on the planet is so much more evolved or is evolving so much more rapidly. And so I feel like now when I'm presented with this type of a challenge, I roll up my sleeves and I'm like, all right, let's get to work. There's clearly some work that needs to be done here. So lots of grounding practices right now, lots of reading and, seeking some guidance, and then also just lots of compassion for myself and everyone else and just, and creativity. Yeah, lots of creativity.
You bring up something really beautiful in that, like, as the collective consciousness rises, like all of our, it's like one and the same, right? What's going on in the
Yes.
collective is happening for us here, and
Yeah.
it's I'm really hearing like an empowered. It's coming from a really empowered place now. Whereas, when we were younger, maybe it was like, these things are wrong with me, and like a lack of self-love because of that. And now it's moved into like, okay, and I can do something with this, about
Yes.
this. This is a cue for me to dig deeper, to go deeper.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm sure children, I don't have children, just furry ones,
Yeah.
but I'm sure they like bring up a lot of inner work that needs to be addressed.
Well, yes. Yes. And my girls are all now. So my youngest one will be 21 in September. So 21, 24, and my oldest just turned 27 yesterday. So my girls are kind of in, their adulthood, and so for my husband and I right now, our lesson is very much about letting them be adults and kind of stepping back in terms of our roles as parents. And I never had any warning that this was coming in terms of like, being aware of there being a shift. Like, obviously, that, as a parent, your kids are going to grow up, but it is a shift that I don't really hear people talk about very often, where you go from being kind of more of a guide and, setting rules and having boundaries. And that's still important with any relationship, whether they're your children or not. But it just becomes, you have to take a step back and just kind of watch them and let them. And, it's a new adventure.
It's like a new identity.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, and it's funny you say nobody talks about it. I couldn't even tell you the name of the podcast, but I came across some podcast. It was a story of this couple who had started a podcast about the period of time in their lives where you become an empty nester.
Yeah.
And it was like they were talking about how like nobody really had talked about it. They weren't ready for it. It was like quite an upheaval in their lives.
Yeah.
And so then they started a podcast on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is part of empty nesting for sure, but it's also part of like, as a mother, you're physically attached to your child. And then as your child grows up, you're kind of making sure that they're taken care of. And my husband and I are recently aware that we have codependency issues. So both of us were raised in homes with, and narcissists, and so it's just interesting, as with codependency, you really want to help somebody all the time, and you want to, you don't want them to struggle. You want to take care of it. And so it's learning to kind of step back, and it's great. Like it's great that we're doing this and we're learning this, and but I don't have any other friends that are going through this right now, so it's interesting. But yeah, it's evolutionary, and from the perspective of consciousness, I think it's interesting to look at what's going on in the world, obviously, and then, the microcosm and the macrocosm. And I think, just not getting political, just looking at it from like a non-judgmental perspective, looking at what's going on with government. And it's like the opposite, they're trying to, kind of come in and take. And so it's just interesting being aware of the microcosm and the macrocosm, and then wondering, okay, when's the macrocosm going to catch up here? Like,
yeah.
let us take care of ourselves a little bit. I know it's different in Greece, but in the U.S., and you were from Canada as well. I mean, it's interesting just watching everything that's going on and seeing how it's affects us, globally. Right. Yeah.
And like you said, letting it inform you on a personal level, not just on a collective level.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing a little bit of personal inner work. So Britt, what you do is so unique and special. I'm so excited to talk about creativity and art and all these sorts of things. But to get to the place where you are, creating artwork infused with Reiki and healing through art and all this sort of thing, I got to know, how did you get to that point in your work? How did that come to be?
Yeah, thank you. It's been a journey. So I was always an artist. When I was a kid, I was totally the kid that would have art play dates. I would look in the classroom during art class or, or whatever, just look around the room and see who the good artists were. And I always wanted to have play dates with the people who were good at drawing so that we could draw together and I could learn from them. I didn't realize that that's what I was doing, but now looking back, like I can tell you in, first grade, it was this girl. In fourth grade, it was this girl, like I just wanted to be friends with the people who I thought were really good artists because I liked to see them do what they did. And then in fourth grade, I had an awesome art teacher, Claudia Wools, and she taught us how to do things that it wasn't like a traditional art class. It was like we were literally doing the same exercises that I was doing in college when I was in fourth grade. So this art teacher was amazing. Like we would take, there are these drawings that Picasso did and they're very, they're not, they're like a little distorted. So they don't, sorry, my cat is like winding her tail.
Going to town.
Yeah. Anyway, so these drawings are like a little bit distorted and she would have us turn them upside down so that when we were looking at them to draw them, we were only seeing the lines, not what we thought that we should be drawing. And mine was really good. Like of all the kids in the class, mine was really good. And it was the first time that I ever thought of like that I was loved to do art and that maybe I could be an artist, I just remember that like idea. And then, when I was in high school, I had an awesome art teacher that again told me like, I see potential in your work and I would love to have you be an assistant in my classroom. And so, it was like, I had really low self-esteem as a kid. My parents both worked and I did not feel worthy of anything. So when somebody would tell me like this thing that you did was special for me, it like just lit me up. It was so important. And I know that this is not an uncommon thing. And I just, teachers in particular can just change people's lives. I think teachers kind of get a bad rap these days because of different reasons, but not all teachers, but, a lot of parents are like, I'm homeschooling now, which is fine. Mm-hmm. But I think, just teachers in general are such a powerful influence for a lot of kids. And I'm so grateful for these teachers that saw something in me and were able to just kind of light a little fire and be like, oh, okay, so there's some potential here. And so I ended up going to college for acting, which was completely different. I went to University of Southern California. And then after like 3 semesters, all I was doing was partying, completely not where I was supposed to be. And I made a lot of friends, but I didn't make it to class very often, which was not good.
They weren't artists.
Yeah. So then I ended up going to an art school in Los Angeles called Otis, and that was great. I basically started college over. So I did the foundation year, and then I went to a wedding after there was like the earthquake here and the riots and all this craziness in LA. And so I was like, I need to get out of here. And I went to a wedding in Chicago. My mom said, bring your portfolio. And I was like, why? And she's like, just go see if you can get into the Art Institute of Chicago. So I was like, all right. Because ever since I was a kid, she was always like, you're going to be an artist. You're going to go to the Art Institute of Chicago. And I was like, no, I'm not, and then this was the moment, brought my portfolio and they were like, yep, you're in, be here in 3 weeks. So 3 weeks later, I moved to Chicago. Yeah. And that was like the best thing. It was polar opposite of University of Southern California, where all I did was party. It was like all I did in Chicago was school. I went to school at 9 a.m. and I had class until 9 o'clock at night with a lunch break and a dinner break, and Monday through Friday. And I finished school maybe like a semester after I would have if I had gone straight through from the beginning. Okay. And it was the Art Institute of Chicago. It's actually called the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Was awesome because when I went to Otis, they would just hand you your schedule. Here are the classes that you're taking. And when I was at the Art Institute, I could do things like fashion design. So I was in the fashion program and I made clothes, and they were on, we had like a fashion show, and, we had to do fittings with models, and it was so cool. And then I also did painting and drawing and that type of thing. So then I graduated, I got an agent, and they don't even have agents anymore. Like when I was submitting to galleries back then, you had to have your artwork on slides. And then you had to submit them to the galleries, and, you had, or shows, exhibitions, whatever it was. And now it's just completely different. But anyway, so then I got my master's degrees while my agent got my artwork in galleries in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, all over the place. And that was awesome. And she was great. She was a hoot. She had just this fun personality, and she just loved artists. So it was perfect. And then I got my master's degrees in marriage and family therapy and art therapy. And while I was doing my practicum at California Pacific Medical Center, I did a certification program they have a program called the Institute for Health and Healing. And this was like 25 years ago. So this was really cutting edge that they had this program at California Pacific Medical Center. And while I was in this certification program, I was working in the hospital with patients in the heart transplant, pediatric, and oncology units, but also they would have healers come in and they would teach us about different forms of healing that I'd never heard of, and it was like I would come home and I would tell my husband and my parents, and they thought I was just this hippie crazy person. But I was so excited. There was a guy that came in that was an indigenous leader, and he was talking about sweat lodges, and he invited us to come do that, and there was just so many things that it just opened my eyes to the possibilities. And one of my dear friends who was in the program, she's since passed away, but her husband came and spoke, and he was an author, and they were very good friends with Ram Dass. So Ram Dass married them. And so this was like a really cool circle of people where consciousness was actually something that we were talking about back then.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, my dad was like super corporate. My mom was an interior designer. So she could see creativity in me. And I always connected with my mom. And then when my mom got lung cancer, we moved from San Francisco down to Southern California. And I got all my artwork back from the galleries because I knew that, there was one gallery that was closing that had like a huge number of my pieces. And so we had a party before we moved down, and it was actually a couple months before we moved down. And I sold most of my artwork to my collectors and friends. And I basically gave them the price that I would make for the paintings after the agent and the galleries got their cut. And then they donated a certain percentage to like the food bank. And my nephew has autism. So there was an autism organization that they could donate 10% to, whichever one resonated with them. So anyway, when I was working in the hospital, I was very much aware of the healing power of art. And it was really interesting to actually go in and be in the hospital with my middle daughter, who I had been pregnant with while I was working there. And when she was a few weeks old, she had stopped breathing and she had like a virus. And we were in the pediatric ICU where I had worked with clients. And in particular, in the cubicle that we were in, one of the clients that I had worked with had passed away. And so we were in that cubicle, and the girl came by with the art cart, who was basically me. Yeah. And she's like, do you want to do art? And there were so many, like, when I tell you, probably 90% of the people when I would come by with the art cart would be like, no, thank you. Mm-hmm. I was the no, thank you. I was the no, thank you. Yeah. I was like, I am so sorry. I know the value that this brings, but my baby is like 5 weeks old and I can't do this right now, And it was so interesting to be on that side of things. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And probably a perspective that like you needed at that time when
absolutely.
you're older. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. But, so anyway, then to just speed it up a little bit, my mom and my sister both had cancer. My mom passed away, in 2012. My sister passed away in 2021. But when my sister got diagnosed, I took Reiki 1 and Reiki 2 with just some friends. And I didn't really practice it as much as I had wanted to, but I always felt connected with Reiki. And then about 2 years in, or maybe a year in, my husband signed me up for just randomly. One of our yoga instructors is a Reiki teacher, and he signed me up. He's like, you're just going to go do Reiki 1 again. Like, it'll be fun for you. Cause he knew it was important for me. And so anyway, I did Reiki 1 and Reiki 2 over. And then about 6 months later, I became a Reiki master. And when I became a Reiki master, I was taking care of my sister, So she lived in Northern California. So I would drive back and forth like basically once a month for about a week or two sometimes and take care of her and her kids. And she had a tumor that was in her back. And it was so painful for her, she couldn't lay down to sleep. And so I would Reiki her back and then she would go to sleep. And by this point in time, I was not painting because I just, with creativity, and we can talk about this a little bit later, but with creativity, you kind of go through seasons. You need periods of time where you're not producing so that you can sort of build up this energy to then, create. And a lot of people think it's like, oh, I'm blocked or I have a creative block or whatever, but you need those pauses. So anyway, I was in a pause creatively, and it was like since my mom had died. So it was, so it was a few years. And in between then, my dad had bladder cancer as well. So like I was just in full on and with the children caregiver mode. Yes. And so anyway, when I was sitting, I had Reiki'd my sister's back, and she had gotten me paint by numbers kit. And so I went downstairs and she was asleep, and I went downstairs and I was doing the paint by numbers kit. And as I was doing it, I had just this like full on clear vision that I was to put Reiki into the paintings so that they could transmit Reiki healing all the time. And so I came back and my mission like will be done when not done, but my goal is to get my artwork into hospitals so that they can be sending Reiki transmissions. Ideally, it'd be great to have like a little mini healing gallery, like a healing art gallery where people can go in and receive healing, kind of like a chapel, or for people who are not religious, or even if they are religious, if they want to just come in and receive healing. And then a lot of times with the paintings, I'll also have meditations that go along with them. So anyway, my artwork just completely transformed. And then I decided I didn't want to go back into the gallery setting because gallerists to sell my artwork and to be able to explain how it works, I just couldn't, I didn't want to depend on a gallery.
Different environment. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, ironically, well, I'll finish this up. But anyway, so I started doing something called Healing House, where I invited people to a space, and I would do a guided meditation, a sound bath, and then group Reiki healing. And then I would introduce them to the artwork around them and introduce them to the same feeling that they were receiving from the sound bath and the group Reiki healing and the guided meditation is the same energy that they're receiving from the paintings. And so inviting them to see the artwork, but also to experience and sense the artwork in a different way. And it was interesting because I went and spoke with the then head of the Orange County Museum of Art, and I was explaining my work to her, and she wanted to know the energy of all the paintings that she had in the museum, which was, she had never thought about that before. So it is interesting when you think about artwork. And I do have healers that have told me that they've had to clear energy in rooms where the artwork was transmitting negative or low vibration energy. So it's just kind of a whole nother topic to think about, when you're purchasing a piece of art, like close your eyes for a second and see what energy you're feeling coming off of that piece. Because while there's so much value in creating art when you're going through healing process, like for the people in the hospital, for instance, there's also a tremendous amount of grief and, other energy that could be low vibration that might be transmitting from that work. So not to say that it's less valuable or anything. I just think people need to tune in, intuitively and just sense like, what energy am I feeling from this? So it's still about what you see visually, but it's also about what you feel in your body.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And how can I work with my intuition? And and I would say for those who are like, ooh, I don't know. It's also just a general energetic hygiene to clear space. So, something that's been in a hospital touched by lots of different energies might need a general cleaning, whether or not you feel it.
Yeah.
Wow. I talk to so many folks who their trajectory, it's so many different phases that are entirely unlike one another. My own, for instance, starting as a ballet dancer and geology, and then intuition, all these sorts of things. And you're one of the first stories that I hear that actually has like a really natural, beautiful, like blossoming alongside your life path. It's really
Believe
beautiful.
me, I had some detours.
Yeah, sure.
I definitely had some detours.
You're like, I took up circus performing. I just didn't mention it. Yeah.
No, I
But
did do
but it
things
really
like
is like
it makes sense now, but it did not make sense to me for a while. Like I did things like when I was in between getting my master's degrees, I was doing costuming and film, which is a little bit different. I worked in a costume warehouse. I had some great experiences, and then I was actually, this is so kind of, I don't know why this is embarrassing for me, but it is embarrassing for me that, like in 2010, 2012, I was one of the early influencers. So I was paid by brands to tweet and to go to Vegas to tweet about like the Billboard Awards, or I used to work with Entertainment Tonight as a social media correspondent. So they would have me on the red carpet, and it was so different. And it's so like, I don't know. It was fun, and it just kept pulling me in that direction. So I just went, I didn't, and I don't know why I needed to go on that journey, but I did, because I ended up coming back to this. When my mom died, I was like, what am I doing? Like back to me. So it's just, it is necessary to have detours for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And sometimes detours take us closer to the path, depending on where we are.
Yeah.
Anywho, so, okay. For the creatives listening, because I'm sure there are creatives listening that are very excited about sort of this bridge between spirituality, the kind of healing arts, and creativity, and intuition, really. And I think for most creatives, especially those who have always been creative like yourself, intuition has probably always been in the room. Whether or not you knew that it was intuition, it's always been working through you in your art. I would love to hear your thoughts on sort of the relationship between creativity and intuition.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when I was younger, I can think back to when I would draw things or when I would paint things, and I didn't know why I was painting them. I was definitely like channeling things. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
And I also think that part of the reason why art is as healing as it is because when we open ourselves up to create art, like for instance, why it was so powerful for the patients who did choose to do it in that hospital setting is because you're allowing the flow of the universe to come through you and sort of cleanse your energy, and it rinses through your body. It's like when you are in that creative space, you're opening your crown chakra and you're allowing divinity basically to flow through you. And I think right now, with the world being the way that it is, with social media and with technology in general, so many people are so busy all the time, and their mind is so busy all the time, myself included, by the way. Like, it's not just, and I have lots of practices, but you can it's the world that we live in. And I think it takes us away from that creative space. And so I think it's important for us to be really mindful, whether you're an artist or not, whether you're whatever you are. I feel like, we sort of talked about this a little bit in the beginning. You can do anything as an art. You can, I think healing is an art. I think, painting is an art, cooking is an art, mothering is an art, being a partner, everything is an art. It's just, it's kind of being in the flow. And so intuition is that voice where you're listening inside and, quieting down. And so I think it's important for everybody, whether you're creative or not, to allow space for that. And, to have boundaries with technology and the noise of the world, and come back, to yourself through that quiet, and when we allow ourselves to have that quiet, I think we allow intuition and our inner voice and our inner wisdom to speak. And I feel like, a lot of artists in particular want to have these conceptual things about, this painting is about this and that. And I'm sure that it is, but there's also an element of, when you're in that space of creation, you're just channeling and pulling energy through you. And so I think all art is a co-creation with the universe.
And so it's experienced. It's like our minds want to explain it or describe it or whatever, but really it's like a felt sense.
Yeah.
That you'll know when you experience it yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you feel the difference? Because I'm sure it happens. I know it happens for me. Can you feel the difference between when you are creating in that space of co-creation, you working with your intuition, and when you are not?
Oh, yeah.
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 Like, what does the difference feel like? Tell us.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you asked this question because part of the reason why my art has shifted from the way that I used to create art was very much about like flow and drip and control versus not control and allowing and that type of thing. That was what my artwork was when I was, when I was doing the slides back then, late 90s, early 2000s. And then now my artwork is very much about being in that intuitive space. So it begins with like saging myself and, cleansing my energy and cleansing all of the materials that are going to be going into the painting and, saying a prayer and meditating and sitting with the piece before I ever do anything, and it's really about channeling that and connecting with that space and being, it is basically like a prayer. Right. The process of creating this artwork is about that. And so, it's just such a different process than what I used to do. And it's also interesting because I used to paint when the girls were asleep at night because that was the only time that I could. Oh, yeah. And so like painting at 10 o'clock at night versus painting, in the morning or earlier in the day after I've done yoga and kind of having it be, it's less about me and my, thoughts. And it's more about whoever this painting is for and whatever energy the world needs, allow that to flow through me, and so being in that space and allowing for it. And there are times like where one of my, like right now with one of my daughters who's going through some struggles, that's on my mind a lot. Right. And so I don't want to paint. I don't want to create and put that energy into the paintings. But what I have been doing for the first time, you would think that I would have done this a long time ago. So my artwork is basically like a spiritual medicine. Right. So each one of the paintings, like this one behind me is, crown chakra, solar plexus, and throat. So I pull out different paintings according to which chakras and what I'm needing. And then I put those in front of me and I sit and I meditate with them. Right. And I just started doing this and my gosh, I can feel it. It's amazing. Like, I'm so like oddly validated.
You're like, wait a minute.
Yeah. Like, this is amazing. This is good. Like this works. So, and I've had other healers along the way who have confirmed that, they sense it and they feel it and, even from digital reproductions or print or whatever, but to experience my own art in that way, I want to use the word humbling, but it wasn't, I don't really know what it was because it made me cry the first time. I was like, wow, this is so amazing, And at the same time, I'm like, this is my own artwork. Like, why am I doing? And then I'm like, the little kid in me is like, wow, that's so cool,
Yes. And, so, going back to what you said, it is, yes, it's your artwork, but it is made for healing, like like its purpose is beyond you, and so letting that be beyond you and outside of you, and then you get to benefit from it as well.
Yeah. I guess what you're saying is, I think that's what it was. Is I felt like since I was the one who created it, it's not for me. Right. But then I was like, but it is.
Perfect.
Yeah. So
you're like, this is why I haven't been able to sell this particular painting.
Yes,
I need to work with this.
Exactly. Yeah. And then that's the other thing is when paintings sit around in my gallery or in my studio space for too long, I'm like, I get the itch to paint over it sometimes, and then I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting. Is that coming from my own need, or is that like I'm sensing that this piece in particular needs a little something something else. So it's just interesting. So I use paint in my artwork, and then, the sage and stuff. And then I also I've studied stone medicine. I'm obsessed with stone medicine. I think it's like people call, crystals, but it's actually a very ancient medicine. So it was before plant medicine, before any of this was stone medicine, and it correlates with the frequencies of the ley lines in the earth that correspond to the frequencies and the ley lines in our bodies, the energy meridians. And I have this textbook called Stone Medicine, and it talks about, the different elements and what different stones can be used for different ailments and whatnot. And it's written from it's transcribed from the lectures of an 88th generation Chinese stone medicine practitioner. So this is ancient.
Amazing. Wow.
Yeah. So I use a lot of selenite, so to purify. I use a lot of amethyst to connect with the crown, rose quartz to connect with the heart. Some of the pieces I use soil that I collected from Energy Vortex in Sedona, Arizona. And so, it's interesting because paint used to be made from the minerals of the earth. Now it's synthetic. And I cannot find, I'm still looking. I do have plant-based paints, but they don't mix. The colors aren't as vibrant and stuff, so I don't always use those. I would love to find mineral paints that are affordable.
Yeah,
They're so expensive. But
I'm sure.
So I put the crystals over the top, which gives a lot of the painting different colors when depending on the angle that you're looking at it. So like photography does not do my work justice at all. And even video, like you can't tell. But so the goal is to have people receiving this energy from multiple modalities. And then I also use a 528 hertz tuning fork to tune all the materials to the frequency of the miracle tone. Okay. And, and so, the artwork there's a lot to it, in terms of the medicine that's in it. And I'm proud to say that I will be speaking tomorrow, and I have a gallery that finally gets it. So I'm going to be speaking, for a fundraiser for this event tomorrow. And then I'm going to be having my work in this gallery here in Southern California. So I'm coming full circle on that too. And I feel like the art world, it's interesting because there are a lot of galleries that are closing, but and big galleries, but the people who were running those galleries are wanting to bring in more of the wellness piece into what they're doing with their art. And they just want to do pop-ups, which is kind of what I've been doing with Healing House. Yeah.
It's like the natural evolution of the art world alongside the collective.
Yeah.
Very cool. And I love to hear the different sort of rituals you have around creating. It inspires me because I've sort of been on a creative journey this year, 2026, and as I'm like new to devoting myself in this way to it, I'm sort of like slowly but surely like picking up things that I'm like, okay, these are sort of rituals I want around it that support it. I would love to hear any other tips or things that you have to share for someone newly devoted to their creativity.
Yeah, I think, there's some people who can show up to the canvas or whatever the material is every single day, and that's great. For me, I don't want to create art every single day because I feel, and I noticed this with my daughter. One of my daughters is a songwriter, and she needs to have periods of time where she's not creating. And I was saying this before with the pause. When you want to create art, I think it's not about being in the mood so much as it is listening to that inner intuition when you feel called. Because that's when you're going to create art that's meaningful, and that's when you're going to kind of be able to tap into that creativity that we all have within us. I think everybody is an artist, as I said before. It just, your medium is your medium could be words, your medium could be, and I think it's just important to just kind of have compassion with yourself. Cause I feel like a lot of people feel like once you start to go down this road with being creative, that it needs to be like, you need to throw a label on yourself, or you need to, whatever. Just like, don't worry about any of that. Just listen to your intuition and feel that calling and follow that. And you'll have periods of time where that's all you want to do is create. And then you'll have periods of time where you need to go spend some time with your friends, or spend some time with your husband, or go hike, or, just be kind of unplugged from everything.
And like accept the seasonality.
Yeah.
That's a very beautiful reminder. I'm actually like now entering a season where I just cannot devote the deep dive that I feel like pulled to go into, because I'm having a wedding in a month and there is a lot.
Yeah.
And when there is a lot, it doesn't matter how much cleansing I do or whatever, I am not there. I'm not totally present, and I'm not in a place where I want to like lose time. That's what I want to do. I want to dive and I want to lose time. And right now, she can't be losing time.
Yeah.
So the seasonality is a really beautiful, I don't know, permission to just be like, we will pick this up next after the wedding, after the season. Yeah.
But just going back to what we were talking about earlier with, the world that we live in, I do think it's important for people to be aware of how much sort of content that they're creating versus consuming, because
let's talk about this.
I think we all want to make the world a better place. I think the most of us want to make the world a better place, and you can't make the world a better place when you're constantly consuming. It's just impossible. So I think whatever your creative outlet is, whatever art that you want to create, make sure you're doing that at least a little bit every day. So for instance, I'm kind of contradicting what I just said, but go with me for a second. I think it's important to disconnect from the consumption, and it's also important to be bored, especially when you're creative. And as I said, we're all creative, we're all artists in some form. So I think if you have a list of things that you have to do over the next month, for you, for instance, with your preparing for your wedding, schedule in at least 5 minutes a day where you are doing nothing. There's no music on, there's no podcast playing, there's no nothing in front of you, and you are just being 100% fully present. Listening to the birds, watching the cat, whatever it is, 5 minutes a day to allow yourself and your brain to rest.
Right.
And then in that is where it's like, that's the soil, and you're planting the seed, to allow that to grow. It can't grow unless you give it the space to grow. And then you water it, when you sit down with your pen or your sketchbook or whatever it is. And the other thing I'll say is, when you are wanting to be creative, have a space where you allow yourself to play where there's no rules. So for instance, like getting a piece of paper out and just painting with water. And it'll go away. You know what I mean? Like it'll dry, but just allowing yourself to sort of play like a child. And that's what creativity is really having that childlike playfulness and curiosity. And I think it's really healthy for all of us to allow ourselves that time and that space to be childlike.
To not have, so for so long, Britt, I thought I was being creative, but what I was actually doing was producing. And this year, that shift has become like very apparent to me. And it's so funny because it came on the backside of 6 weeks of unplugging. After I unplugged for 6 weeks, I was like, wait a minute, I have not been creating. I have been producing and performing. Essentially, I've been, like feeding an algorithm. I've been doing to get, creating to get. And and I lost my point, but let's just stay on this. Like, as someone who does it for a living, one could say that there's an external influence if you let there be an external influence. What do you do as a creative, as someone who's a creative for a living, to not allow that external influence to influence the art, the channel, the sacredness of what you're doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a very sacred space. So, as I was saying before, like, I'm not going to create if I'm not, I will only create when I'm in a high vibration space. I will only create when I'm kind of, in that. And, and so for instance, like I have this show that I'm doing this week and I have this stuff that's going on with my daughter. And so I'm not creating this week. I'm just, and so I think, I have other friends that are artists and they go through the same, sometimes they have months where they're not creating. And I think, it goes back to what I was just saying with just allowing yourself to play, you know? And I also think doing things like being in nature are so important with, giving us inspiration and allowing us to kind of tap into that divine energy of the world and the planet, and that we all have access to. And so I think for anybody, if you feel like you're kind of in that mode where you're doing things for other people or you're doing things for recognition, always tapping in and asking yourself why, like, what's this about? And there's always lessons, but then just going back to having compassion for ourselves, and like compassion and playfulness are like my two key words right now, because I think life can be and feel so heavy and serious sometimes if you're paying attention to all of the things that you're consuming. You know what I mean? Like the content, the this, the that, whatever. But if you just go back to like the flow of being in that kind of curious, childlike space, you allow yourself to recalibrate in such a beautiful way, And yeah, so I think that that's a really important thing. And then, kind of just building on what else I'm doing with, I'm an artist, but I'm also a quantum guide. And what that is basically is when I got my master's in marriage and family therapy, for instance, I've always been the type of person that any stranger will meet me and tell me like their deepest, darkest secrets. I don't know why. That's just how it is. And I'm down with it. Yeah. Yeah. I'm down with it. And then, the codependent one in me wants to help fix everything, but that's another story. But so like, I've always wanted to help people. I've always been in that space. And so when I was just doing my artwork, I felt like, okay, well, my artwork's giving back, but my soul needs that kind of helping other people actively. And so I started working a long time ago. This was when I was kind of on one of my detours, but even before that, when I was still, right after I stopped working in the hospital, I needed something that I could do while my kids were at school so that I could make money. And so I started coaching mom business owners. And then that really became, business coaching is very much life coaching. It is, and so, yeah. And so I was coaching moms. This was back in the day, 2006, 2007. I was coaching moms about, basically having a passion-based business, but aligning your business with the lifestyle that you want, which is now in my language that I have now, creating a business that is aligned with your soul mission. And so, I think people were creating businesses that they felt stuck in, that they weren't really necessarily happy with what they were doing, but they needed to make money. And so, they weren't kind of looking at the bigger picture of what they wanted to be doing. And so now what I'm doing, and I've also trained in quantum healing hypnosis. So I didn't do Dolores Cannon's program, but I did Candace Craw Goldman, who worked with Dolores for like 10 years or something. And she created this process where you can incorporate Reiki and other healing modalities, whereas Dolores is very strict. You have to follow her protocol. This allows you to bring in other healing modalities. So I started doing that one-on-one with clients, and I can only work certain days of the week. I hold a lot of space. I was doing single sessions. Then I was like, nope, people need help integrating. So then I was providing like a 6 or 5 week container, and that was great. And people were, and I'm still doing it occasionally, but I need to be present with my artwork and with my family. And so what I'm doing is I created a program where I give basically people the tools to receive the information that they would be receiving in a hypnosis session. They can just do it without me. I'm guiding them through it, allowing them to receive access to that information. And then they can do this process in 5 days or 5 weeks. And I have some people who have done this program several times and they're getting amazing results. And so it's called the Quantum Manifestation Self-Study Program. And manifestation is such a buzzword, and so is quantum, but it really is, it really is about whether you have, I have a lot of clients who have cancer. I have a lot of clients who have business problems or relationship problems. And it's really just giving yourself this space to have a process where you go through your limiting beliefs and where you go through understanding yourself on a deeper level and your timeline of what happened up, from before when you were born until now and how that created you, and flipping things around from seeing them as, things that happened to me to things that happened for me. And so figuring out the lessons and so it's just a really powerful program, and people are, experiencing amazing transformations. And then I'm doing just pop-up. I'm calling them pop-up because when I have time, I'm doing basically a group coaching call for anybody who's done the program so they can have access to me. Nice. If they have questions and stuff. So it's just, we all have our different ways of doing things. We all have our different magic that we bring. And, I've had a lot of experience with all kinds of different things. And so I love to help share the tools that I have learned with other people so that they can, because I really do feel like kind of going back to that collective energy. And I'm hearing more and more people talking about this, but I didn't know why I was creating this program other than I had people that couldn't fit into the timelines that I was offering. Now I understand the reason why I created it the way that I did is because people want to be able to be their own healer. They want the tools to do it themselves. And so I'm handing the keys over to them so that they can now have a process to do it themselves. And I think it's great to have support. And I think there are amazing people out there, and I still go to healers for things, but I also want to be able to have the tools to do things myself.
Yeah, definitely. And I think everybody, the way that they go through their healing, everyone's different and it's different seasons, but in the end, where we're headed with intuition, with our relationship to self, all of it's ultimately going to come from within. So more and more programs that we can have that allow us to access that, the better. So and it sounds very much like the work we do here at Spirit Club, which is really all about looking at the reality you're creating, and if you don't like it, well then there are things you can do about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Wow. Well, it doesn't surprise me that you have this sort of like more practical, hands-on side with your earth placements, and also with just like the life experience that you've seen and had. So before we close, Britt, what would I like to know? As someone who's had a life as a creative and who's also been very involved in healing, what do you see going on? Yeah, what do you see going on in the collective with respect to creation? Like people becoming creatives, things that are being created. Like, where are we headed? What do we need to, what is some wise advice from you?
Yeah. Well, what just came up for me when you just said that is AI. And so I got rid of my smartphone. I don't have a smartphone. I'm recording this I'm on an iPad right now. I have an iPad. Yeah. But when I'm out in the world, I'm on a little thing called a light phone. It's just phone text. You can have other apps or whatever that you download. It looks like a little mini Kindle. I'm very much like, I think technology has its place. And I think AI probably has its place with helping things. But I feel like as a collective, a lot of people, just like when we were younger, we've always been programmed. Technology is the way of the future, right? Like we all heard that. And I think it's really important for people to question, is it? Like, how much technology do we need to allow into our lives? I think that with AI, a lot of people are scared that they're going to lose their jobs, or they don't trust it. And I don't trust it. And the reason I don't trust it is because when I've used it to try and help me with things, it lies. Like, why is that okay? You know what I mean? And then I'll say, wait, that's not true. And then it'll be like, oh yeah, you're right. It's not. And I'm like, okay, so why would I use you? You know? So I think, AI, whatever, if you want to use it, great. I think that there's definitely things that it can be used for. But I think, like, as a collective, there is a split right now with people who are wanting to go more towards nature and intuition and listening to yourself. And then AI is putting that outside of yourself, and it's artificial intelligence. It's not inner intelligence, it's artificial. So how much energy do you want to put into that? And I think it's important for people to really consider this. It does go back to the consuming versus creating. If you are using artificial intelligence, you're consuming. You might be co-creating because you're giving it prompts, but ultimately you're consuming whatever the artificial intelligence is giving you. So no judgment. That's for me personally, especially in the art space. I think I want to be more into the materials. And I also had a choice when I was in art school, whether I could go in the graphic design road, and I chose to go in the paint, pencil, kind of old school. And so it was interesting because I never really realized that that was a conscious decision that I made. But I do remember I had a choice of graphic or fine art, and I chose fine art, and I'm still choosing fine art. So I just think it's important. Like, I don't have any answers. All I know is that it's very important for people to be tuning into their intuition. And artificial intelligence, like, I asked when I first found out about artificial intelligence, the first question that I ever asked was, do you have access to the Akashic records? Because I was just curious.
Yeah.
And you know what the answer was? I
Yeah.
don't, but I can pretend I do.
Oh, okay.
So I was like, well, I don't really want you to pretend, because that's
Yeah.
really weird. So I just think going back to intuition and kind of, steering people back to what I believe, it's sort of a test. It's a test of the consumption versus creation. If we want to be creating a better world, maybe you can use it as a tool. I'm not sure how that looks for you, but just make sure that you're always kind of in the creating mode more than the consumption mode.
Yeah, I mean, really, when you think about it, like, yes, AI is increasing our consumption, and it's kind of like, even if we didn't have AI and we were just like, whatever, scrolling Instagram and all this sort of thing, you can get very confused at, like, am I creating, or am I, like, just like being influenced and replicating? And AI is just like another level of that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so almost just to make sure that you're actually saving space for intuition, for communing with the divine, for creation. And in my opinion, I don't think that we are going to move away from AI. AI is going to be a part of our lives, but I think that we can choose to not, like, let things get out of hand. We can find a way to, like you said, you described it as a split, people going back to their roots, nature, and all this sort of thing, almost as a rebellion. But I think it could also be both and. There is going to be a both and we'll find it.
Everything in moderation, right?
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, Britt. So we know about the quantum program. What's it called? Quantum
Manifestation self-study. So it's a study of the self by the self.
Ah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Any other ways that people can work with you or access your work?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram, so if anybody wants to check me out on Instagram, it's Britt with 2 T's, and then Michaelian is spelled like Michael Ian. And my website, brittmichaelian.art. And I've just always got stuff going on, little events. I started out doing Healing House once a year. This year they're going to be 3. So,
yeah. Oh, and hey, the gallery that you're going to be in, I know we have some Californians as listeners. So what gallery will that be?
It's at Scape Gallery. So it's Southern California Artist Projects and exhibitions. So it's Scape, SCAPE Gallery, and that's in Corona Del Mar, and right near Newport Beach. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for sharing your story, your experience, your wisdom with us. It's really beautiful to know this kind of work exists in the world. And I think for people to hear about it is to be like, wow, like you can really like bring all parts of you to the table.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Britt. And
Thank you.
Spirit Club, until next time. Bye.
Bye.